Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be a little bit different to what I would usually upload, and also a trigger warning here. If you get uncomfortable or you find any of these topics uncomfortable, then this video isn't for you either. We are going to be talking about sexual health, vaginal health, and a little bit of sexual trauma as well. Yes, if any of that would be triggering for you, again, I will see you in another video in the future, and I hope you're okay. This video it's going to be quite difficult for me to make because I've never made a video like this before, and I do believe that I had quite a specific traumatic experience with this. So I've made a lot of notes, like I've made like a full document here of the things that I want to make sure that I cover in this video, because I feel like it's such an important topic that I want to make sure I get this right. And I think one of the major factors that made it so traumatic was a lack of knowledge and understanding, and a lack of communication from my NHS team that actually dealt with the procedure that I went through. And that's really hard to say because I love the NHS. I have a long-term health condition. I use the NHS a lot. I have a lot of positive, good experiences with the NHS, with nurses, with doctors, like all great. But this in particular, this didn't go well, and I'm going to say exactly why I think that happened. I want to make it very, very clear now that I encourage everyone to have this treatment. If I needed to have this treatment and procedure again, I would have it time and time again. If anything, my next time having the procedure would be a lot better because I'll be going in a lot more informed, and I will have an idea of what I need to do to prevent the bad things from happening that happened before. I want to make it very clear that the procedure itself, from my experience, didn't hurt. It was painless, and it felt absolutely fine. The problem that I have wasn't the procedure, it was the experience around the procedure from the staff and the run-up to what had happened, and this will all make sense later on in the video when I've explained it properly. So yes, I am not doing this video to discourage people from having any treatment with their cervix or anything with cancer. I want to make it clear again that I will have this treatment time and time again. I will always have this treatment if I feel it's necessary and that it needs to be done. I would much rather have this treatment than have cancer. So please, please have your smear tests, have your colposcopies, have your LLETZ treatments, have everything. There are lots of reasons why I'm making this video. So one of the main ones is that before my procedure, I obviously googled what was going on, and I also had an issue with misinformation from my GP practice and from the Women's Health Clinic. So I want this video to hopefully be a source of information and personal experience for anyone who might be going through the same thing as I did. I personally think it's really important that people know exactly what they're going into, and I think when you have an understanding of what's happening, you're less likely to suffer anxiety or panic attacks, worry, things like that. And I genuinely think that if I had saw a video like this before going into my procedure, it would have gone 10 times better. I also want to make sure that this video helps give people an understanding of what the full treatment experience is, from being informed by letter to booking your appointment to having the procedure, and also the full recovery process all in one. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So in October 2020, so it's been quite a long time since then, I had my smear test. It was my second smear test ever. I have no issue with these. They literally take less than 5 minutes. It's like an in-out kind of job. I do have something called a cervical erosion, which I believe I have mentioned previously in my videos, like a long time ago. This is where the cells on my cervix, so like this is my cervix here, the cells on my cervix like grow on the outside, which creates symptoms such as bleeding during sex, or bleeding if you sneeze, or I'm trying to think of what else it does, I can't quite remember. So anyway, in relation to my smear test, that means that I do bleed when I have a smear test, but I still feel absolutely no pain. I feel no discomfort. Smear tests are super easy. There's loads of videos about having them done, so I yeah, everyone should have a smear test. That's the first step in preventing cancer, because obviously they make sure that you don't have HPV or abnormal cells. Anyway, fast forward a couple of months, I had actually completely forgot I had a smear test, to be honest, because it had been like over 2 months and I hadn't heard anything. So I mean, and I didn't have any symptoms in particular other than the symptoms from having a cervical erosion, which I have had medically checked out at a hospital before. So I wasn't feeling worried. And then I was at work. I was actually at work by myself because the business itself was closed due to coronavirus, but I was there doing a little bit of admin stuff, and I had a phone call from the hospital. They rang me, and this, from my opinion, was probably the very first point where things weren't handled the way that I feel they should have been handled. And just quickly, my GP and hospital have apologised to me, and they have said that they are doing an investigation into why these things went the way they did, because they agree that they have a certain way that these situations need to be handled, and they weren't handled in that way. So yes, I had a phone call from the hospital. They rang me and went, essentially just said, we need to make an urgent appointment for you to come in next week. Can you come in on Tuesday? This was Thursday, and they were asking me to go in on the Tuesday, and I was like, all right, yeah, that's fine. What time? And in my head I was thinking it was something to do with my colitis, because I have to often go in for my infusions, for blood tests, all that sort of thing. So I'm at the hospital all the time anyway, so I didn't think anything of it immediately. And then she made the time and went, great, so I've got you booked in for your colposcopy for that time. And I was like, wait, what? Sorry, what do you mean a colposcopy? And she went, yes, you have a referral for a colposcopy with immediate effect. And I was like, all right, okay, I haven't heard anything about this. Why? And at this point, this is when this lady said that she was just the receptionist and that she didn't have any information as to why I needed to have this appointment, but that I just needed to go in, and she recommended that I speak to my GP because I should have had a letter outlining everything. And I was like, great, I've not had any letter. So I'm sure you can imagine how it feels as someone just going about their normal day-to-day and then just suddenly having a phone call to say that you immediately have to go to the hospital to have a procedure without any information as to why or what's happened or what could mean that, or what that could mean, like what that procedure means, what it entails. So of course I immediately went into a panic that something was really bad, and I remembered I'd had my cervical smear, and I thought, oh, maybe my results were really, really horrible. This is awful. So yeah, this is the point when I found out that I needed to have a colposcopy. And if you don't know what a colposcopy is, I'll put an image here. So basically a colposcopy is a really simple procedure. It's a camera that looks at your cervix. It's not a camera that goes into your vagina. The only thing that enters your vagina at that time is a speculum, which if you've had cervical smears, you know what a speculum is. A speculum is basically just a plastic instrument that's inserted into the vagina that opens it slightly so that the medical professional has a clear view of the cervix. The camera makes it so it magnifies so that they can look up close. The colposcopy itself is really easy. It takes only about 15 to 20 minutes. They'll have a look, they'll know exactly what they need to do from then on out. So if your cervix looks normal, they'll say, great, fine, we'll see you again for your smear in 3 years. And then if there's something not quite right, they can do further treatments or refer you for other things. The actual procedure itself of a colposcopy didn't worry me because I've got colitis, I've had colonoscopies, flexible sigmoidoscopies, I've had quite invasive procedures done before, so this wasn't something that I felt particularly worried about. It was more that I didn't know why I was being referred so urgently to have this done. So back to the story, I immediately rang my GP to question what was happening and what my results were. I was told by the receptionist at the GP that the nurse that deals with these problems wasn't in clinic that day and that she wouldn't be in until Monday. Obviously I said that that's not okay because I was told I should have received a letter and I haven't. So obviously before getting this phone call today I should have had some kind of information as to what my results were and why I was being referred for this treatment, and that my procedure is on Tuesday. So being rang up on Monday when the procedure is the following day, I personally think that's not good enough for communication. that would mean that I'd be worrying about it all weekend, not knowing what my results were. And not knowing why I was having this procedure done, and that's intense. So it started off on the wrong foot, in my opinion. It was immediately handled incorrectly, and I was very, very, very worried. I was told that a doctor would ring me back later that day, and I did get a phone call from a doctor that same day. So it wasn't the nurse that they said, but it was a doctor. They profusely apologised for what was going on, and they said that they fully understood why I was feeling the way I was, which was nice that they were so pleasant about it. This doctor did go through my results. They opened up my file, obviously, and went through what my results were, what it meant, and what was going to happen. They obviously apologised for me not receiving a letter. They had said that they had received my results on the Monday, but obviously nothing had been done about it for some reason, and then it was Thursday by that point when obviously the hospital had rang me to make a referral. So between that time I should have had a letter sent out, I'm assuming by first class. I'm not entirely sure. So it turned out that in my October cervical screening they did find HPV, and they also found what they believed to be CIN3 abnormal cells, but that they wouldn't know that without it being confirmed at a colposcopy. They wouldn't know that for sure. He explained that the colposcopy was to look closer at my cervix to confirm whether I did have CIN3 abnormal cells, and that I would then be referred for treatments if necessary, if I needed them. So he did explain that CIN3 abnormal cells is not cancerous. It's pre-changes to cancer, so if caught early these won't change into cancer, and they are fully treatable. Following that phone call I did feel better, but I did frantically search Google for what it meant if you had HPV, what it meant if you had CIN3 grade cells, because I'd never heard of that before. That was the word he said. Actually he called it high grade dyskaryosis, which is CIN3 cells. I will put information up here to talk about what all this means. Obviously I'm not a professional, so I don't know entirely what that is, but I've printed out the images that I'm going to be using, so I'll just quickly read through them. Having HPV itself is actually not really a bad thing. It just means that you might have a slightly increased risk of developing cancer at a later stage. It's something that a lot of women have, and they really reiterated that to me, that a lot of women have this and they don't even know about it. Usually it clears itself up or it goes away within 6 months. Some people who have abnormal cells alongside HPV might need to have treatment to remove those cells, just because those people in particular have a even higher risk of cancer. But people who have HPV and no abnormal cells or really low changes usually don't need any further treatment. They'll either be invited for a cervical screening in another year, or they might need another test to look at the cervix, like a colposcopy, but normally they don't need any further treatment. So like I said, I will put images here, and I am really sorry they are quite graphic, but that's why I did the warning at the beginning of the video. So there are 4 different types of cell changes in the cervix if they find abnormal cells. Obviously, like I said, I'm not a medical professional, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about this. I was told I had high grade dyskaryosis or CIN3 grade abnormal cells, and this meant that I had a high chance that these cells could become cancerous if they were left untreated. So this also meant that during my colposcopy, if they were able to confirm that I did in fact have CIN3 abnormal cells, that I would need further treatment. Like, there's no ifs about it, that if they find that, I will need further treatment. I also just want to make it clear that during all of this I didn't really have any symptoms. Actually, I didn't have any symptoms at all, so I wouldn't have known that I'd had this if I hadn't have had that cervical smear. That's the scary thing. Like, if I hadn't had that smear and then forgot about it, like, I would not have known whatsoever. So that's why it's really important to have these routine smears. So at this point I was not informed or told of any further treatments that I might need to remove these cells and what they would entail, because of course I hadn't received a letter. It was just a conversation on the phone with the GP who went over my results. He did briefly mention that I might need to have biopsies taken and have some cells removed, but that didn't really tell me any information about how they would remove them, what that meant, recovery, you know, anything like that. So I went into this with no information, genuinely. Like, I just did not know. I tried Googling, and it's very different online to what it actually is. Like, people are like, oh, it's great, it's no problem at all, you don't feel a thing. And it's like, well, and yeah, so I didn't find any of the information that I found online particularly helpful or informative, to be honest. Even the NHS is very brief, I think, quite brief in how they describe what the treatments are. And yeah, I went into this just not really knowing what was going on, and also feeling anxiety from previous misinformation. So I felt maybe there was like a lack of trust from then on out. So now I'm going to be talking about the day of my treatment. So I went the weekend worrying, frantically Googling, watching videos of people's experiences that didn't really give me that much information, because everyone seemed to have quite nice experiences from what I was watching. So the actual day of the treatment didn't go as well as it could have done for many reasons. Some of those reasons are completely out of the control of the staff and completely out of the control of the actual procedure itself. So I had to go for this treatment at the hospital, at the Women's Health Clinic in the RVI. I had to go alone because of coronavirus, and I think personally going alone, or just not having someone there when you're coming out of the procedure, is another one of the main factors that made this experience so difficult. I think even if you're not allowed to take someone with you, I would definitely recommend that you have someone pick you up, or waiting in the car park or something similar. Yeah, so in hindsight, for any future appointments, if I need to have this again, I would definitely ask Eric if he wouldn't mind either, if he's still not able to come with me because of coronavirus, but either dropping me off and picking me up later on, or waiting nearby in a cafe, or waiting in the car park, you know, something like that, just so that I have someone there as I'm leaving the hospital. So yeah, when you arrive, I obviously had to wear a face mask. The hospital was like arrows everywhere, and everything was all social distance. Everything was great on that part. The doctor who was doing the procedure takes you into a room, like a little interview room, where they'll talk to you about what a colposcopy is, why they're doing the treatment, your results, and that was all fine. But then she did say at that point that if they do confirm the CIN3 cells while I'm there, that they would do the treatment immediately. And I personally think that being told when you're there that you'll be having that treatment done immediately isn't good enough. Like, I don't think that's enough time for me to mentally prepare for what's going to happen, especially after she explained what some of the treatments were that I could be having literally within like 15 minutes of having that conversation. So yeah, I went in feeling like not too panicked, but at that point I even said to her, I was like, do you know what, I felt fine all morning, but right now I'm feeling quite panicked and my heart is going a little bit. And I did ask her if they do sedation or anything similar, because when I have my colonoscopies, because I find them personally quite painful because of my condition, I normally get sedated. She said they don't do sedation for this sort of procedure, but they can offer me gas and air. She asked if I had had gas and air before, and I said no, and just said it basically relieves tension, and some people say that they feel a little bit drunk and tipsy, but it gives people like the giggles, and people normally have it when they're having a baby. So at that point I was like, alright, okay, that sounds like it would be fine. So yes, I did agree to have the gas and air at the time. Yeah?
She was crying to come see you. Just being like literally out the door crying, and like, ugh.
Sure.
Yeah, so I was just listening to you then, just waiting till you had like a break, and then I was gonna let Daisy in.
Hello. You just want to be with me? You want to lie down, or are you just going to sit and stare at us? Yeah, so to be perfectly fair to that doctor, she did explain the colposcopy really well, and she did explain the further treatments quite well too, but I think just knowing about this stuff like 15 minutes before your procedure is not enough time. I think that if I had received the letter and if I had received more information by the phone call that I had with my GP, that things would have went a lot better than they did. And yeah, don't get me wrong, she was a really nice person as well. She was super friendly, you know, really chatty. We had a bit of a laugh. So the actual staff themselves weren't bad. Anyway, yeah, so I was then taken to a changing room. I was given a hospital gown and I was told that I needed to remove all my clothing from the waist down, including my underwear, and that I needed to put the gown on. And then that changing room led to the procedure room, so I didn't obviously have to go on a corridor or anything. You just went straight into the procedure room and onto the bed. The procedure bed is like, it's like a half bed. It stops at your waist and you are asked to shuffle right down so that your bum is like hanging off it, so that the doctor can get obviously right up to your vagina. It's nice and comfortable. They lie you right down. You've got a pillow. I was told that I could remove my mask once I was lying down, because obviously I was already breathing quite heavily from worry and panic at that point. You also put your feet up in stirrups to support your legs so that your legs are nice and open so that they can see everything. This is never anything that's bothered me. I don't care if doctors see my vagina or see my bum hole. They've seen it all before from colonoscopies and all that sort of stuff, so that's not something that bothered me whatsoever. I know that some people can find that difficult, and you know, some people are very private with stuff like that, so just be aware that you do have your feet up in stirrups and you obviously have a hospital gown, but these people see hundreds of vaginas, probably even more, maybe even some of them might have even seen thousands of vaginas, so they're not going to care what your vagina looks like whatsoever. They'll probably totally desensitized to all of that sort of stuff anyway. By this point I was all on the hospital bed. I was all like legs and stirrups and everything ready to go. I was feeling quite panicked because obviously I'd just been informed that it's quite likely that I would be having treatment immediately, and I didn't entirely understand what those treatments would mean. I know she did explain them at the time, but when you're already feeling worried, it does kind of like go in one ear and out the other. You don't really have time to research, you know, do Google searches, watch people's videos and experiences on those specific treatments, that sort of thing. And obviously because of coronavirus, things were done a little bit differently. So in my previous experiences in hospital, with colonoscopies for example, there's a nurse holding your hand. She's like right next to you. She's been really supportive and like chatting to you, talking about your day, you know, trying to keep your mind off it. But in this situation, unfortunately the nurse and the doctor weren't allowed to be very close to me. I wasn't wearing a mask, and I don't have a problem with doctors wanting to protect themselves because of coronavirus. Yeah, so I think the whole alienated feeling of how clinical and how far away everyone was, and the lack of emotional support that I had, also was a contributing factor as to why this went the way it did, why it ended badly. And that's not necessarily a fault of the hospital staff. It's a really weird situation, and I'm not claiming whatsoever that I think the hospital should have put their face close to mine, or put themselves at risk and their families at risk, because obviously I fully support how amazing the NHS has been during the whole coronavirus pandemic. I do think there's a fine line between compassion and safety, and I'm being very careful when I say this because I'm not claiming that anyone should put themselves at risk. But when people are visibly distressed, and you'll understand this when I get further into the story, I do think there needs to be a line where compassion maybe should have been better than it was. So I did inform them at this point that I was feeling really panicked. My heart rate was going really fucking fast, and I felt like I couldn't breathe, and I knew that I was going to start having a panic attack. I've had them before in the past. I haven't had them for a long time, but I knew that this was going to lead to a panic attack from a range of not fully knowing what was going to happen with regards to treatments, not necessarily the colposcopy, and also just feeling not as informed as I could have been and generally being worried up until that point. So obviously getting to that point, my heart was already on high, my breathing was already going. Yeah, so I told them this. They then gave me the gas and air. I tried it and immediately, like, I felt really fucking drunk. It was not great. I did not like the gas and air. It made me feel out of control. It made me feel really unpleasant. It actually immediately made me cry, which was weird, and it took me by surprise. I'm not a crier in any way of the sense. So tears were just streaming, and obviously I was laid down, so it was just streaming into my hair and my hair was getting wet. And I was apologising for crying because I felt embarrassed. And the doctors were saying, and the doctor and the nurse were saying, that's fine. Some people it makes you laugh and some people it makes you cry. This is a normal reaction to it. And I really didn't like how I felt whatsoever. Like I said, I felt out of control. I felt emotionally unstable because I was suddenly bawling my eyes out, crying, which is not like me whatsoever. So I kept trying to stop taking it, but the nurse kept raising my elbow to push it back into my mouth and telling me to breathe it. But I was also like feeling quite drunk at that point, so you know, quite easy to tell me to do it again and I'll do it. And yes, and I didn't feel like I could articulate it to them that the gas and air was making me feel out of control, and that was not doing a good job of calming me down. It was actually making it worse, and I couldn't seem to get that out. So obviously they thought they were doing the right thing. They thought the gas and air would continue to calm me down like they said it would, but actually it was doing the opposite. So I personally, I don't think I react well to gas and air. I know lots of people who have had babies and have said that gas and air was incredible. So you do what you think is best for you. Just be aware of how you feel in yourself, and if it doesn't feel right, stop doing it. Because in the future, I now know that that was not good for me, and I will refuse gas and air. And I think I'd feel a lot more in control, and I think the experience would go a lot better. Just had to change my battery, so I hope this is in the right position again. I also just had to run up and down the stairs to put the other battery on charge. Anyway, so to paint a picture of where we're at so far, that not only did I go in feeling misinformed, and a lack of trust because I didn't get given the information that I should have been given, just being informed on the day that I would need those further treatments on that day, 15 minutes before going in for my procedure, and then the weird faraway clinical feeling that people can't be close to me and can't be like emotionally supportive, and also the gas and air making me sob uncontrollably out of nowhere. I'm sure you can see how this went the way it did, and why, if things were done very differently, it would have been a very different experience. So yeah, the actual colposcopy itself was absolutely fine. I didn't feel a thing. She obviously inserted the speculum, she looked at my cervix, she did some cotton swabs, obviously they've got to like dry up the area. They also do like a, I think it's an iodine solution, which means they can see things. I don't know exactly, you might need to look into that. But I did get an iodine solution put on my cervix. Didn't feel a thing, no pain. Obviously you do kind of feel like movement, but that's it. They are supposed to let you see your cervix on a screen like they do with colonoscopies. I've always seen inside my bum. I've seen my full colon on a screen when I've had that done, and that's even when I've been in a really bad flare and it doesn't look good at all. They still let you see it. So the colposcopy screen was actually turned away from me. They wouldn't let me see it. Obviously I was sobbing uncontrollably and being quite panicked, so I can understand now, looking back, why they might have not wanted me to see it if my cells were bad, because that would contribute to the panic and the worry in their eyes. But from my opinion, as someone who likes to be fully informed and know exactly what's going on and likes to be in control of situations, I think that was a big mistake. I think they should have asked me if I wanted to see it or not. And I personally think that them, at the time me thinking they were hiding it from me, made me think that it was worse than what they expected, or that it was particularly bad. You know, those sorts of things. So that contributed to the anxiety and panic. Okay, so in the midst of this, of me sobbing uncontrollably and panicking and just not feeling great whatsoever, she then said, it is what we think it is. You do have the abnormal cells that we thought, that we discussed before. I'm going to do the treatment right now. And I was like, oh my god, it's happening. I was already feeling in a total panic. My heart was going absolutely fucking crazy. And looking back, I can laugh at it. Like, honestly, at the time, I was so miserable. But looking back, I'm just like, oh my god, I'm so embarrassed. And it's not even that it was my, like, it wasn't even my fault. It was just like loads of things kind of contributed to this like explosion of emotion. And no, I don't know, I hate it. She said that she was going to do something called a loop biopsy, which is also known as a LLETZ biopsy or LLETZ treatment. I will give you some information. She said she was going to give me a local anaesthetic first, which is an injection to numb the area, and that I wouldn't feel a thing. So the thought that you're immediately about to have a needle injected into your cervix is petrifying. And also I didn't entirely understand what it was going to be like. It's that fear of the unknown, you know, you don't know what it's going to feel like because you've never had it before. Obviously they did explain it to me in that interview, roughly what it was, but I don't know, I like to do a lot of research, so I didn't feel very informed. I'll go over what they are. So there's different treatments that you can have if you do have abnormal cells. Sometimes they'll just do like a normal biopsy, sometimes they'll do a loop biopsy, which is what I had, and then other times a cone biopsy. So a loop biopsy or LLETZ treatment is carried out when you're awake. You have the local anaesthetic, like I said, and it's essentially a metal instrument that has a loop like that. It has an electric current to it, and it heats up from that electric current, and they basically like do a little scoop of your cervix and remove like the whole layer of cells. Yeah, it is exactly what it sounds like. It doesn't hurt. Like I said, they do give you a local anaesthetic, so you really do genuinely feel no pain. I definitely didn't feel any pain, and when I left the treatment, I do think that had the other things changed, like the inflammation and the gas and air and the panic, that this procedure would have went really smoothly. And I think my next one will go really smoothly, because now I know, I say my next one as if I'm definitely having one, but if I did have it again, like, I know it'll go really smoothly now. I think I'll go in feeling absolutely fine, because now I know exactly what it feels like and exactly what it is and what it does. But yeah, I just think the actual experience of it wasn't great. Okay, so they switched the machine on. I was laid in bed with the stirrups and the lady in my vagina. I just had a general anaesthetic, which you don't feel. You do kind of feel the needle go in, but painless. Like, I did jump a little bit just from shock of having it done. But it was fine. I didn't feel any pain. The machine is like next to my head, that heats up the instrument. It was really loud buzzing noise. I could barely hear myself think. I could barely hear them speaking. So yeah, and I already felt really like drugged up and woozy from the gas and air, because apparently it affects me the way that it did, just not great at all. So on top of feeling out of control emotionally and just panicked, and the loud noises, like, it was just the weirdest experience. I'm not sure how I don't know how to explain it in any other way other than it felt surreal. It felt like I was having an out-of-body experience. I could hear the doctor in the background saying, just stay still, over and over again. And I don't know about you, but if you're being told to stay still over and over again, it makes you think that if you don't stay still and if you move a little bit by accident, that something's going to happen. And that was definitely fueled by the anxiety and the panic that I was already feeling at that point. So I was like shaking my legs. Oh my god, my legs were shaking so much because I felt so panicked. It was the weirdest. I've never ever felt that way before my whole life. She sounded really far away, and at the time I wasn't sure if it was because the machine was really loud and I felt a bit drunk, but then everything kind of went black, and I could still kind of hear her. Like, it felt like I was dreaming, and I could hear her in the background going, just stay still, almost done, just stay still, but like so far away, like really muffled and far away. I felt like I was gonna pass out. And since this happened, and since talking to various friends about this, Friends have mentioned that it actually sounds like I did pass out, and I actually don't know. I can't say for sure if I did pass out or not. Looking back, I feel like I might have, but I just don't know. Just things went black and everything was muffled and I don't fully remember. So maybe that means I did, maybe it means I didn't. Maybe it was just so stressful and my body was just in such a state of panic that it just couldn't manage it. Crying profusely, hair was soaking where it was like going into my hair. I felt incredibly embarrassed. I never get embarrassed, but this was just too much. I tipped the scale. I was so embarrassed at my general reaction, at feeling out of control with my emotions and how I felt and how I was acting. My legs were shaking all over the place. I was like holding onto the gas and air with the lady's hand on my elbow, like oh, horrible. The actual treatment itself, didn't feel a thing, didn't feel an ounce of pain. Obviously there's a speculum in my vagina and an instrument that's like heated up. Didn't feel any heat, but I did feel movement, like from like her moving around and the speculum moving, but didn't feel any pain whatsoever. I can say that wholeheartedly. Afterwards I didn't feel any pain. She told me to take some paracetamol, and genuinely I don't even think I really needed it that much. They obviously like kind of pack the area when they're finished. They kind of put stuff in there to stop it from bleeding as much, because obviously you've just had some cells removed, so it's normal to bleed afterwards. They go through a bit of aftercare with me. They have to kind of talk you through it, I think, legally. And they give you a maternity pad to wear. And honestly, I just felt really embarrassed, and that's why I left crying so much. I felt embarrassed at how I reacted, and I felt really uncomfortable at just the way everything was handled. Yeah, I was asked to sit in the waiting room just to make sure I was okay after the gas and air. And I think also because I, you know, didn't look okay. But no one came to see if I was alright before I left. I sat there for 5 minutes. No one came back, so I just got up and left. Went to my car, sat in my car, cried the whole way home from embarrassment and just, I guess, relief as well that it was finished with. The actual treatment itself felt like it was a really long time, but it was only about half an hour when I was there. From getting there and having my interview to having the procedure done. Yeah, cried the whole way home. Came home and Eric came down the stairs. He was working from home at the time, obviously. He came down the stairs and was like, "You alright?" And then I just burst out sobbing, and he just hugged me and held me, and I was just so horrible. And he was like, "Wait, what's happened? What's happened?" And I was like, I couldn't say what had happened yet, because I felt traumatized. Like, genuinely, I felt traumatized. Like, it felt like the worst experience in the world for me, emotionally and mentally. And yeah, I just sobbed for ages while Eric hugged me, and I couldn't talk to him about it until later on in the day, when I felt like I had recovered slightly emotionally. Yeah, and then I felt able to tell him, and it's been a long time since I've been able to talk about it on here without feeling like I'm gonna cry all the time. Like, I feel like I can talk about it in a normal way, be able to have a bit of a laugh about it, and be able to understand and articulate everything I was really feeling and why I think it went that way without sobbing. So that's why it's now March, and why I'm filming this video, and why it's taken me like 3 months. Okay, so let's talk about the recovery and the aftercare just a little bit. This is another thing that I wasn't prepared for whatsoever, and I didn't know would be as intense as it was. Don't get me wrong, I didn't feel pain. I did have a little bit of cramping as if I had a period, but that felt totally fine, especially as someone who gets quite regular abdominal pain from having colitis. But I would say it wasn't any more pain than if you had a period. So yeah, it really wasn't that bad pain wise, but there was just a lot of things unexpected that I feel like maybe you're not told about, so I'm going to talk about those things now. So I'm going to put up the NHS information here, but then also talk about, let me shuffle along. I'm going to put the information here for what the NHS say, but also talk about my personal experience with it. So yeah, like I said, they do read through a leaflet before you leave, but I do think that at the time maybe you're not quite taking it in, because, well, me personally, I wasn't in the right frame of mind to actually be listening to what they were saying, because I was crying my eyes out and just not okay. So it's really good that they do give you a physical leaflet to read when you get home, and I did Google profusely when I came home as well. So if you have had general anaesthetic, you shouldn't drive for 24 hours, but if you've had a local anaesthetic, which is what I had a local anaesthetic needle into my cervix, completely fine to drive with, so I was fine to drive home. And the same as the gas and air effects kind of go away almost immediately after you stop taking it, so I was completely fine to drive home, albeit not mentally and emotionally, but physically I was okay to drive home. You are told that you shouldn't use tampons or menstrual cups or put anything inside your vagina for 4 weeks. You should wear pads. I was also told that you shouldn't have baths, and you shouldn't have sex, and you shouldn't go swimming for 4 weeks. Although the NHS thinks here says 2 weeks for swimming, they told me 4 weeks when I was there, so I'm just going to say that just in case. You are told that you'll have to have a cervical screening again in 6 months. This is to make sure that obviously the treatment has worked and that you are all good to go, back to your normal routine of cervical smears. So mine is booked for in June, and I'm happy to update people as it comes, as and when it happens. If you would like to know stuff like that, just let me know and I can update you. And then obviously after that smear test, it starts the cycle again. So obviously if they find abnormal cells, you'll have to have a colposcopy again, you'll have to have more treatment, etc. And I don't know how far it goes, but it goes on like that. Obviously the general time frame is 4 weeks for recovery, but they told me that because of my medication lowering my immune system, for me it might be 6 weeks, because it might take me a little bit longer to heal than the average healthy person. So the first few days weren't too bad. Eric was lovely. He went to Superdrug and bought me a lot of maternity pads, because obviously I didn't have any maternity pads because, one, I've never been pregnant and never had a baby, so never had a need for them, and also wasn't aware that I would need such thick, big pads after this treatment. I just didn't know. I thought I might need just normal pads, which I already had when I was leaving, but yeah, it seemed that the amount of fluid coming from my vagina was not being held for long enough inside a normal pad. Like, I needed maternity pads. Okay, so yeah, like I said, the first few days weren't too bad. It was just like a clear fluid that every now and then, like if I was moving around, if I walked a little bit downstairs, I would get a gush and just loads would come out. It was the weirdest feeling. It felt like I'd just wet myself. Like, it felt like I just weed, but I hadn't. Like, that's how much fluid there was. It was so strange, and I would have to change it quite regularly as well. I think I was changing it every 3 to 4 hours. One, because I'm a bit of a germaphobe and I'm terrified of getting infections, but also like it was just getting so wet and it felt uncomfortable. It felt like I was wearing a nappy. It was awful. The fluid was clear-ish, extremely watery. Like I said, it was just water. It wasn't if obviously if you're a woman, you know what discharge is like if you have discharge, so it wasn't like a discharge texture or anything. It was a lot more fluid. Yeah, like I said, I did have some cramping pretty much for the first 2 to 3 weeks. The cramping lasted, and it wasn't really that bad. A lot of the time I forgot about it. It was just every now and then I would remember, oh, I've got a twinge kind of thing. So after about roughly 4 or 5 days, I suddenly started getting a lot of bright red blood rather than the fluid, and it was definitely a lot. And the first time I had it, it happened during my sleep. So I woke up and there was blood on my knickers, and I was wearing maternity pants, so the fact it went around all of that and leaked out onto my knickers around the maternity pads, I knew that it was a lot. I did look into this, and I felt quite comfortable knowing that this, from my point of view, felt like a normal process, that obviously the packing had come away, or whatever they do to prevent the bleeding had obviously wore off, and now I was bleeding again. Maybe some scabbing had been removed. But please, if you have had this treatment and you are bleeding and it seems to be an abnormal amount, please seek medical professional advice. You know your body better than anyone else, and I can't, it's hard to explain on a video without anyone saying how much blood there was and stuff. Do you know, you don't know if you've got the same as me, so seek medical advice. So I did regularly leaked over the maternity pads with blood and fluid for 2 weeks, possibly up to 3 weeks. No, actually, yeah, probably around the 2 weeks, the 2 weeks mark. Yeah, so it was a lot, and I was having to change a lot, and thank God I didn't have to go to work, because I don't know what I would have done if I had to go to work and I was just constantly leaking outside of maternity pads. That would have been really fucking shit. So I'm so sorry if you've got to go to work. You might want to consider wearing actual like maternity underwear rather than just the pads. At around the week 3 mark, obviously the fluid was becoming less and less and less. I still think I had a significant amount, but it was at the point where it wasn't leaking over the pads anymore. I just felt incontinent. I felt like I needed a nappy, and I felt like I was constantly weighing myself. It was just strange. I didn't feel like an adult. So yeah, that physical part of it, like I just wasn't expecting it to be like that. I don't know, to be honest. I just wasn't expecting to need to wear maternity things for like 3 weeks and be constantly gushing fluid. I don't think they really talk about this anywhere, to be honest. I'm not sure. I guess a lot of people also don't talk about the emotional impact it has, and how you need to recover emotionally. For probably like up to 6 weeks, I would say that I felt like down there wasn't a safe area for anything to go near. And by that I mean that I did not feel comfortable having a bath, because I was petrified that water would go in and it would remove a scab, or I would get an infection from like, I don't know, dirty bath water going in my vagina. Obviously you can't see your own cervix, so you don't know how healed it is. It's not like a wound on the outside of your body where you can see when it's healed, so I just didn't know if it was healed or not. And with the sex element, yeah, I was petrified to have sex for the first time again afterwards, because I was so scared that it wasn't going to be okay in there. It's awful. It doesn't feel nice. It's not nice just not knowing what your body's going to be like afterwards. And obviously I know people have had babies and stuff. This isn't the same whatsoever. But as someone who has had previous sexual trauma, which I am happy to say that, I'm not going to go into detail, but I have had previous sexual trauma, so it brought back a lot of unpleasant memories of feeling really uncomfortable and not wanting to do stuff like that. So the first few times it was really difficult and emotional, and we did have to ease into it again. So just, you know, it's nice to let people know that maybe you might need to consider things like that afterwards and be prepared to deal with stuff like that, which I wish I had known more about beforehand, because then I think I would have been, like I said, more emotionally and mentally prepared for it. It's now March and I feel completely fine. Everything's completely back to normal. There's nothing to worry about anymore until I have my smear in June. I do need to go to the hospital to have my smear, not to my GP. Obviously they did mention that in the future, after having a loop biopsy, it might be more difficult for a general practitioner at your GP surgery to do a smear test, so it might be that I always have to go to the hospital for them now. I guess we'll find out after June. And yeah, so I don't need to think about it until June. I feel fine. I have no symptoms. I didn't really have any symptoms before anyway, but I have no symptoms. I have no pain. My life is back to normal. Like, I can have baths, I can have sex if I want to, you know, like all that's fine. And yes, so that comes to the end of this video. I just want to reiterate that I encourage everyone to have this treatment done. Hopefully you've watched this video and you have a better understanding of what it includes. You might understand that it's painless, or at least it was for me, and you'll go in feeling a lot more informed about what the treatment actually is and what it involves, how long it takes, the fact that you get a local anaesthetic, that it doesn't really hurt, that you know what the aftercare is like, you know what you need to do so you can actually make sure you've got things like maternity pads, and maybe take a few days off work, because I wouldn't have known. If I was at work, I wouldn't have taken those days off and I wouldn't have known I needed them off. So I don't know, maybe take some holidays off work for a few days. Yeah, like I said, I did report the miscommunication problem and they have apologized and they have said that they're going to do something about this. So hopefully this doesn't happen to anyone else and everyone gets told exactly what the results are and what they mean and what might happen before they go into all of these treatments. Unlike me. Yeah, thank you for watching or listening to this whole video. I know it's going to be really long. I really appreciate all of your support. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel, and I love talking about stuff like this. I love sharing my experiences and knowing that maybe it's helped at least one person. So yes, if you like videos like that, please do subscribe, leave a like down below. If you've had this treatment, please do let me know what your experience was like, because I would be very interested in knowing how it differed to mine. And I will see you in my next video. Bye!